Hello and welcome to the Feeling Good podcast. I am your host, Fabrice Nye, and joining me here in the Murrieta studios is Dr. David Burns. Hi, David.
Hi, Fabrice.
Dr. David Burns has been a pioneer in the development of cognitive therapy, and he is the creator of the new team therapy. He is the author of Feeling Good, which has sold over 5 million copies in the United States and has been translated into over 20 languages. He is an emeritus adjunct clinical professor of psychiatry at the Stanford University School of Medicine. All right, so here we are again, and we're continuing with the third model of anxiety treatment, and this is going to be the hidden emotion. So I really like this one because I know that it's a little bit wider than just cognitive, so I'd love to hear what you have to say about this, David.
Yeah, the hidden emotion model is a fantastic model, and it should be a part of the treatment potentially for every patient or client who's struggling with any kind of anxiety. It's also incredibly helpful for patients who have hypochondriasis, going to doctor after doctor with complaints of pain or dizziness or fatigue, and there's no organic explanation for it. The hidden emotion model can often be curative for those patients as well as patients with anxiety. And the idea behind the hidden emotion model, it's just radically different from the cognitive model or the exposure model, and it probably traces its roots more in some of the Freud's psychoanalytic thinking or the thinking of psychodynamic therapists. But the idea behind it, which we've mentioned in a previous podcast, is that niceness is the cause of almost all anxiety in the United States at this time. And what that means is that if you're struggling with anxiety, the probability is extremely high that you're this exceptionally nice person. And while it's good to be nice and to want to please people, individuals who are like myself, who are predisposed to anxiety for some reason, whether it's upbringing or maybe even it's a genetic thing that we inherit. But when something comes up that's upsetting to you, and you feel like you're not supposed to have the kind of feeling that you're having, you automatically, subconsciously sweep the problem under the rug. And then it comes out indirectly as a phobia, a panic attack, OCD. It can come out as virtually any form of anxiety. And the way I stumbled across this was that in the early days of cognitive behavior therapy, I was doing really my best work with anxious patients, asking them about the thoughts that made them triggered their anxiety and using exposure techniques and dozens of cognitive techniques, and they were all helped, but the majority of them, I couldn't get them to complete recovery. They'd get stuck at 30% recovery or 50% recovery. And then when I stumbled across this hidden emotion technique, suddenly the ones I was stuck with, most of them made breakthroughs and their symptoms disappeared completely.
How did you stumble upon this?
Well, I think we mentioned that in a previous podcast about the woman who was having these panic attacks at work where she would think that she was going to vomit on her boss, and she kept having to go home, with sick every day, and because of these panic attacks, these fears of nausea and vomiting, which is not unusual. And then, I was helping her quite a bit, but she was still pretty symptomatic. She was only, 50% improved, and And then one day, it came out that she actually, was doing great work, and her boss was giving her promotions and praises. She was helping him with his new wholesale business selling soda pop to grocery stores and things, and they were doing great, but she just blurted out that she actually didn't want to be spending her life like this, that she'd always wanted to design women's sportswear
right.
ever since she was a little girl, but she thought she wasn't allowed to want to have that feeling, to do that, because like she was so used to pleasing people, and she liked her boss, and this was her first job out of college or high school or whatever it was, and she was performing well, and then when she finally owned up to the fact that this isn't what I want to be doing with my life, and talked to her boss and made the plan to help him train a replacement and then pursue her dream, her symptoms instantly disappeared, and then I began to see it in more and more patients that I was treating, and in myself, and although initially I thought it was a very rare phenomenon, eventually I saw that this thing happens with 75% or more of individuals who come for treatment for anxiety. Now, I'll show you the way it works with a vignette, because that's the best way to try to to solve an actual problem. But there's two parts to the hidden emotion model. The first thing is called the detective work. That's where you help the patient figure out what it is that's bugging them, that they're not bringing to conscious awareness, the thing that they're suppressing or repressing, or whatever terms you want to use. And there are some hints about that, what that might be. One hint is that the conflict that's hidden, that they're not dealing with, or the problem, is not buried in the past. It's buried in the present. It's something that's bothering them right now. A second hint is that it's something ordinary, like the woman who really couldn't stand her job, but didn't think she was permitted to feel that way. She thought she was supposed to like her job because she had such a nice boss, et cetera, et cetera. So it's something like, you're mad at somebody, you're upset about something, you want something you think you're not allowed to want. It could be any emotion, even loneliness. I've seen can be a hidden emotion in men who think they're not supposed to feel lonely, and then they develop hypochondriasis or OCD symptoms or whatever it happens to be.
There's something that's not acceptable to demonstrate, to show.
Yeah, something that's not acceptable, some feeling they think they're not supposed to have, to show or to have or to express. And then the final thing is that the anxiety is generally a symbolic expression of their fear. Anxiety is like a waking dream, and the thing that you're afraid of is often symbolically representing the problem that you're not expressing. And now I can give you a good example of it, a really cool, dramatic example. Do you remember Terry, the woman who was having the panic attacks, who thought that she was going to die of a heart attack?
Yes.
Okay. Now, I did not use the hidden emotion model as a part of the active treatment to cure her, because the experimental technique we did with the jumping jacks came on so early in the treatment and had such a potent effect that we didn't need any more techniques because the anxiety was vanished. But I did ask her, because I had forgotten during the initial evaluation. I said, Terry, I forgot to ask you what was going on the first time you had a panic attack 10 years ago. I haven't told this story, right?
No, I don't recall.
No, I don't. Hopefully I'm not senile and repeating myself excessively.
It doesn't really matter. I think that those bear repeating anyhow.
Yeah. Hopefully our listeners have some give us a little.
I think
little
they're very
leeway.
tolerant. They're very tolerant.
Yeah, and at any rate, she said, "Oh well, it's so interesting that you asked about the first panic attack, because I've been to so many doctors and medical doctors and psychiatrists, and nobody asked that question. But what happened is, my husband and I were not wealthy. He has a good job and we're doing just fine, but we'd always dreamed of a Caribbean vacation." And so my parents said they'd watch our 4 children, babysit for a week if, my husband and I wanted to save up our money and go to the Caribbean for a week. So we were all excited, and we saved money for 6 months, and we decided to go to Jamaica. And we invited a couple to come with us, a couple we often go to movies with and kind of friends that we hang out with. And then she said, when we arrived in Jamaica, we were all on the same plane and everything, and we got into the taxi to go to this resort that we had booked. And she said, I was having a conversation, with the other woman, the wife of the couple that was joining them, and she said it dawned on me that the other couple had the expectation that my husband and I would be paying for the entire vacation, the plane, the taxi, the tips, the food, the lodgings, everything, and this just shocked me, because we'd never had any conversations like that. And we could never afford to do something like that, and then Terry told me I didn't say anything for 30 seconds. Now, between you and me, I suspect she started hyperventilating like that, and that's what would later on triggered all of her panic attacks. She'd get upset and hyperventilate, and then her blood pH changes and she gets tingling and the other symptoms. But at any rate, after 30 seconds, she blurted out, "I think I'm about to die," because she suddenly had her first panic attack at that moment and thought she was having a heart attack. The taxi driver panicked, drove them to a first aid station, where they gave her oxygen, and that was because she said, "I can't breathe." That was the wrong thing to do, because she was actually breathing too much. She had little carbon dioxide, so her blood pH changed, and the oxygen that they gave her made it worse. And they said, "We don't know what this is, but it looks serious, and we recommend that you get on the next plane back to the United States and go to a major medical center for emergency treatment." And so that's exactly what they did. And went in the same taxi right back to the airport, booked the next flight home, and she went to an emergency room. Of course, by then, panic attack was long gone, and they did EKG and x-rays, and everything was normal.
Sure.
And sent her home bewildered, but the vacation was ruined. And when I tell this story in workshops, I ask the audience, and I can ask some of our listeners right now, what did Terry's panic attack communicate to this other couple? What message was she receiving? Maybe take a piece of paper and jot something down right now if something comes to mind. What was the symbolic aspect of this panic attack? And so we'll just pause. 1, 2, 3. Okay, and presumably you've jotted something down. You don't have to, but it's a better learning thing for you if you do. And if you like the exercises, we'll put more of them into these podcasts also. People in the audience come up with a lot of ideas. Many of them pretty darn good. For one thing, what she's saying to this other woman is "You make me sick," right?
Yes.
She's also saying, "You ruined my vacation, so I'm going to ruin your vacation."
Yeah.
and she's also saying, I'm not going to pay for we're not going to pay for your darn vacation.
She's pissed
But
off.
yeah, she's pissed off and upset, but being a nice person, you see, she thinks she's not allowed to have those feelings, and so she doesn't admit it to herself, much less express it to the other woman, and then it comes out indirectly as a panic attack. That communicates all those messages. I'm pissed off, and I'm not going to pay for your vacation, and you're really upsetting me. Now, then I ask, so that's, you can see clearly how anxiety works to indirectly express this hidden feeling that we're having. Now, then I ask workshop audiences, therefore, would you think then maybe Terry is passive aggressive? Put your hands up. And then most of the hands go up. They say, well, actually, I don't agree with that at all. Because when the anxious individual becomes aware of this feeling that's being suppressed or hidden, in my experience, practically all the time, then they're very willing and good at expressing it to the other person, which is not the case in people who are passive aggressive. But it's the not knowing that you're feeling that way. That's what the thing is. And so I worked with Terry a little bit, not so much from the cure or elimination of symptoms point of view, but after that initial elimination of her anxiety, we worked a little bit on assertiveness, and because then she said, "Wow!" And she said, "You're right. That's gone on in all of my panic attacks. Like I'm upset with my children, they're misbehaving, and I try to discipline them with love and logic, and that doesn't work very well sometimes with children. You have to be a little bit tough and a little bit firm with them, which again she didn't know how to do because she thought she was supposed to be so nice all the time, and so that I thought might also be helpful in terms of relapse prevention for her to learn to be more open with her husband, her friends, her children, just simple kinds of things. But that's an introduction to the to the hidden emotion model. And again, we could have easily we could do another podcast next week if you like. We could have 2 on the hidden emotion model, and then I could give many entertaining and really cool examples of how it works with generalized anxiety, obsessive compulsive disorder, hypochondriasis. Just giving our listeners, a lot of examples of how the hidden emotion model works, because it's a fantastic thing to add to your armamentarium. And the thing I like so much about the hidden emotion model is several things. First, it has great explanatory value because it explains to us the timing of any kind of anxiety. It doesn't come out of the blue mysteriously without rhyme or reason like Freud proposed. It's always related to a human experience that's triggering the anxiety. The second thing I like about the hidden emotion model is that it has great healing power, because once the patient figures out with your help what the thing is that they're avoiding or repressing or suppressing, and then they express that, there's generally a dramatic improvement, often a total elimination of symptoms at that point. So it has really mind-blowing healing effects. And then the last thing I love about the hidden emotion model is it teaches us that the root fear in most anxiety is really the fear of the self, the fear of who you are as a human being, the feelings that you have in response to all the things that are happening, good and bad, to us every day. And that in recovering from a so-called anxiety disorder, it's not, getting over an illness, but learning to become more of a human being and learning more about what a truly human experience is like.
It's like shedding something so you can reveal yourself, really.
Yes, right.
Now, there's something that I wonder about the hidden emotion in terms, always going back to how to operationalize. And what if you work with someone and you suspect maybe there's a hidden emotion, but you can find it, they can't find it. It's like, well, no, I'm perfectly happy in my family, my life is good, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
So how would you go about doing this detective work?
Every patient says that. They at first they can't get it, and so what I do is I ask the patient twice a session. And it only takes a minute to do this at the start and end of every session. It was the way I used to do it. I used to say, now, Fabrice or Marilyn or Sergio or whoever the person is, I have a pretty strong hunch that there's something bugging you that you're not telling me about. It might be you're angry with someone, or you don't like your job, or there's something you want that you think you're not supposed to want, like a different kind of career or whatever it might be. And your anxiety is because you're not expressing that feeling. Does anything come to mind? For example, your panic attacks always seem to come on at work. Is there something about your work that you're unhappy about, or your colleagues? And then the person will say, "Oh no, Dr. Burns, everything is fine. Just help me with my OCD or my panic or my phobia or whatever." And then at the end of the session, I ask the question again, and I'll toss out maybe another hypothesis. Have you thought of anything that's upsetting you that you haven't told me about? "Oh no, Dr. Burns, everything is wonderful in my life. It's just this anxiety." And the rest of the time, I'm using cognitive techniques, exposure techniques, and motivational techniques.
Right.
The patient is the only one who can come up with it, and most of the time.
Right.
I can never figure it out, really. And but generally after 3 or 4 sessions, the patient will suddenly come up with it. In most cases, say, "Oh, there is this one thing I forgot to tell you about," and then you suddenly see it, and you kind of kick yourself because it's so obvious. You say, "Why couldn't I have seen this earlier?" But once they see it, and then you can help them, act on that, solve that problem, express that feeling, and that's when you see the sudden change in symptoms. And
Right.
If Freud heard about this technique, he'd probably croak in his grave, or find it overly simplistic, or
Right.
not as fancy as psychoanalysis. To me, it's just like a real simplistic version of psychoanalysis. Essentially, I'm saying to the patient, "I know you're suppressing something, and I'm going to have to demand that you bring it to conscious awareness right now."
It's like you're putting a bug in their ear, and it starts acting in the background.
Yeah, you're actively pushing to get that thing to conscious awareness, rather than a passive, psychoanalysis on the couch for 5 years, 5 days a week, waiting for something to emerge. But at any rate, I have found it to be very effective and very kind of exciting and heartwarming too.
Well, very interesting, David. I like that, and like I said, this is one of the techniques that I am quite fond of, even though it's.
Oh, you like it too?
I do like it. It, because it kind of surprises clients when I work with them using this.
Yes.
So anyhow,
Nick,
I just
want to do another podcast on this next week.
Well, we've been doing a lot of podcasts in this series on anxiety, on Scared Stiff, and so I think we may want to give our listeners a little bit of a break when we finish this series, and we'll go back to the hidden emotion later on.
Good.
But I want to remind everyone that, as we said last time, that this podcast is giving a lot of very valuable information, but information alone is not enough to really transpire into people's practice, and so people can actually receive really good training from the Feeling Good Institute in Mountain View, and they're online at www.fgui.org. www.feelinggoodinstitute in one word.com. They have weekly online meetings with small groups of clinicians, some very talented trainers that I really, really enjoy working with. And so that would be a way for people who are not living in California to take what we're talking about here and really turning that into a useful, practice methods.
Fantastic. I totally agree with that. And thanks again, Fabrice. It's always so much fun working with you.
All right. I love it too.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, David. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
This has been another episode of the Feeling Good podcast. For more information, visit Dr. Burns' website at feelinggood.com, where you will find the show notes for this podcast under the blog page, and where you can leave your comments and questions. The website has an abundance of resources for therapists as well as non-therapists, including books, workshops, a list of online training groups around the world, and much more. Theme music is Gypsy Jazz in Paris, 1935, composed and performed by Brett Van Donsel. I am your host, Fabrice Nye, and I invite you to join us next time for another episode of the Feeling Good podcast.